to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Jamie University. We are here. It's Thursday, February 2nd. National Signing Day was yesterday, Jamie, and we didn't.
Oh yeah,
we didn't even do a show. We're so slackers. Didn't do a show on National Signing Day, but no, there's like one signing day now. I don't know why they pretend there's another one. There's one signing day. There's like 10 kids that committed yesterday or whatever, like big kids. And it's just like there's signing day was moved from February to December. And didn't sign a single guy, CFB Hertz says. Unbelievable. A total debacle. What's wrong with the Notre Dame recruiting operation, Jamie Uyeyama, in 2023? No signees on National Signing Day for Notre Dame football. Is it time to panic? Should Marcus Freeman be ushered out of the program?
I think it's clear that's the case.
It's got to be brought up. It's got to be brought up.
I really miss the old signing day.
Same.
I think for people who really followed recruiting, it was like you would book work off kind of day. Like for a lot of people, it would, or you did a terrible job at your job because you were paying attention to checking, refreshing ISD's board or checking Twitter. But I mean, before Twitter, it was like all like you're checking the message boards. Or you're just like,
message boards.
Deontay Greenberry didn't sign yet, or whatever, right?
On?
Like,
it's not.
I mean, that might have been Twitter times. I don't know, but I definitely like the Greg Little, that debacle. That was a signing day thing. So yeah, like I think that I miss that. And I guess Peyton Bowen was that in December, but it was like, it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same. Like, which is why I still think they should have an early signing day, but December is a terrible time to have it. They should have it before the senior season. So anyone who wants to sign before the senior season, get it over with.
Yeah. Like fine. July, August.
Here's the other thing too. People can sign, and then if there's coaching changes, they can ask out of their NIL or NLI, right? They can ask out of it, and then now teams don't fight or programs don't fight it; they just let them out, right? Yeah. So, I think it would be better to do that, and then you have the rest of the February, and then that's the big deal.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you everyone for tuning in. We're gonna wrap up 2023 a little bit. Then we're gonna go into our top 5 needs for the 2024 class. I'm really excited about the 24 class. I like a lot of players. There's a lot of good skill players that I'm excited about. We've kind of alluded to it on previous shows, so we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk a little Bud Elliott, Jamie, as I told you yesterday. We're gonna talk about his comments or his tweet, I guess. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you hear, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Smash, obliterate, destroy the notification bell so you never miss our shows. If you're watching on replay, do the same. Thank you very much for tuning in. All right, Jamie. So our guy Lucas Dazan, he has exams. I guess he's taking tests or whatever. So he was in the show. He was in the chat early. S. Gomez says it's time for Hit and Hustle. That is absolutely true. Thank you, S. Gomez, for always being a part of the show. So Lucas asked a bunch of questions, so we're going to go over it right now. Do you feel that Notre Dame – oh, I should probably put it up so people can see it. All right. Do you feel that Notre Dame can and will load up more on the D-line this class? The roster is yet to be determined moving forward after the spring and next season, but I can see Notre Dame taking 5 strong defensive ends and D tackles. So, Jamie, let's do a little spoiler alert, right? So your top – I believe it was your top need – in the 2024 class was edge rusher. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do I have that right? Yes. So that was your top need. It's not my top need, but it's your top need. And then you had interior D-line, I believe, at 3?
Like 4 or something, I think.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I think that I think we would agree that Notre Dame can and will up on the class. We could see 5 or 6 along the defensive line, I think, maybe even pushing to 7. So how do you feel about that, Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be like, I would guess 5 to 7. I would say minimum 5, right? Like it would have to be like it didn't go as well as planned for them to only take,
Yes.
right. I don't agree with what Lucas is saying as taking 5 SDs/DTs. Like, I mean,
I think he means defensive ends. I don't think strong defensive ends because they have a ton of those guys.
I think that's kind of like what, if you look at like where they had like the last class, they took a lot of those guys, right? They took a lot of those guys who already kind of fit that. So I mean, if you're taking that many, then you're just overloading at the thing. And that was like one of those reasons why Brandon Davis Swain, who was originally committed to the class and then decommitted. No, I mean, I wasn't like in love with him as a prospect. I think he was, showed really good passer's potential, but I think he was a bit of a tweener. But because he was kind of like a bit of a tweener and kind of fit that, is he an end? I don't know if he's an end. I'm not sure if he's going to grow into a 3-tech. I think when you look at a guy like that, him leaving the class, I'm like, okay, that's probably good because they already have Owen Wafu, who's already kind of like that too. He's kind of fits that mold. So they can only take so many of those guys.
Yeah.
They could take, I think, maybe 2 more of those in that class, in this class. Guys who could maybe be like the inside outside guys. I think that's fine. But they need edge guys. Like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Viper. I think you want to get at least a couple Vipers, I think, but just guys that that are going to be guys that can rush off the edge, right? So Bryce Young, right? Like that's going to be a guy for them in this class that I think is going to be super important, right? And obviously you're seeing him blow up, like that kind of guy where it's pretty obvious he's an edge guy going forward, and that's the way I kind of see it. And I would say that they want to get 4 guys that they are confident can play on the edge, and then go from there.
Yeah. It has a follow-up. Furthermore, do you believe that Notre Dame's shift in defensive philosophy, in essence, the difference between Freeman and Golden schemes, is becoming more noticeable within who Notre Dame recruits?
No, I don't think so, because I think it's pretty like what Notre Dame did with Freeman when still BK was the head coach.
Yeah,
it's a kind of a similar approach. I don't really see it as that. And then I know that Marcus Freeman has kind of talked about like, although, yeah, you're going to eventually like settle into something and get it. You're not going to turn down like a good player and just say like, oh, because this guy can't play in our scheme. No, you're going to get guys and you're like, we can fit the scheme around these guys, right? And you want to be versatile enough to do that. And you want to be multiple enough to do that. So I don't really think it's like one of these things where it's like Al Golden wants Mike Backers who are like 240 pounds and this or whatever. Like, no, I don't think it's anything like that. I don't see it. I don't see the shift in philosophy being drastic enough for that to be that big of a difference.
I mean, I think a big kind of talking point, I guess, right now is people are speculating it's like they're moving closer and closer to like a 3-3-5 type that we saw a lot at Cincinnati. So like, do you see any of that just in the recruiting?
Not really. Like, yeah. I got to be honest, because I just don't see, they haven't recruited. Because I think if you do that, you need more of like that, those overhang, like hybrid safety type defenders, and they haven't really gotten those guys. Like maybe Brandon Hillman could be that, I guess, right? Like, but I don't know if that's what they recruited him for that specifically. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying I couldn't see them going in that direction, because so here's a perfect example. Like, I think Maris Leofeld would be better as an overhang player than as an inside linebacker, right? Yeah. I think, there's definitely like Jack Kaiser can certainly play as like an overhang player or whatever, right? Like there's some of that. But I just don't, I don't see, the main thing is, I don't think they have like the nose to play that kind of nose guard that they want there. So they don't have enough of those guys to play kind of 3 down with it. And I just think that, like, if you're going to sign 5 to 6 or, 5 to 7 defensive linemen, I don't think you're going to play 3 down.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't see that. So I don't think that's the way they're going.
Okay. All right. And I think you had one more. One last one before I walk into examination. There's quite a bit of predictions for cornerback Leonard Moore to Notre Dame. Specifically, Matt Freeman put in a prediction. I think it was 2 days ago for him. Some believe that a decision could be made sometime soon. What are your thoughts? We believe that there could be a decision sometime soon. That's correct. That would line up with what we're thinking. And we were actually discussing him. I think it was yesterday with Matt, just on text. Like, is he really 6'2"? Because if he's 6'2", then he's a really good prospect in my mind, right? Like he because then there's weight to put on, right? He's a little lean, he's not very thick, but if you got the 6'2" frame, then you can put on weight. Like, that's not a big deal. It's kind of like Ben Morrison in that, like, you can look at Ben Morrison's arms, like he has like he's got skinny arms, but he has really long arms. So it's like, that he can put on weight and it's like going to be good weight, right? He can distribute it throughout his body really well. He's very long limbed. I see Leonard Moore in a similar way. So yeah, I mean, I think it looks good for Notre Dame. I would look for something fairly quickly, right? I don't have an exact time frame, but I think a lot of the time when Matt puts in a prediction, it's like he feels pretty good about it, and it's not something that's going to happen down the line. So yeah, any comment on that for you, Jamie?
I mean, I really like Leonard Moore. Yeah, I think he's super long. Like you said, I don't like when corners, like, when you see a corner, especially when you see some of these guys in person, if they're like totally maxed out, if there's a guy who's already like, you're like, this guy's 205 pounds and he's like 6'2", 205, I'm like, well, then this guy literally has to like try to almost cut weight to like kind of stay at this whole, like, maybe he's a guy who's going to stay at that the whole time, but it's like, you got to work at it. Cause there's only so many Brandon Browners out there, who, I mean, for those who don't know, Brandon Browner was like a former, I think he went to Oregon State, and then he was played for the Seahawks for years. And he was part of that Legion of Boom. He was like a 220-pound corner, super physical guy, but just, I mean, there's just very few of those guys that are out there that can actually do that play at a high level at 220 pounds, right? So, yeah, like, I think you're looking for a guy. I mean, Sauce Gardner is a perfect example of, like, the guy was like a string bean, and then, but he had the length and whatever. It's like, it's more about like the hips and the feet, the length and all that kind of stuff. And I think that Leonard Moore, I think he's a bit raw in terms of technically, but love his compete level and press. I think he's a guy who's a good tackler and ball production. He finds the football. And when you're 6'2" and you can find the football, it's a pretty good start right there. And I think he's, I would say he's, in my opinion, he's underrated nationally.
Yeah. All right. This is a question I might have to think more about, because it's a good question. And so I want to kind of give a good answer. So, S. Gomez, what's an ongoing Notre Dame football topic that you think fans spend way too much time thinking about, and one you think fans don't think about enough?
Ooh, that is a good question. A great question. I would say NIL is something that they right now, that's something that fans spend way too much time thinking about. I'm not saying it's not important, but I'm saying that is like, it is like the main topic. It's like it's like any kind of good news that comes out, like, that's like, it's like, oh, well, just wait, because NIL is going to screw this, right? Or it's like bad news. It's like, well, obviously NIL, like, it's like the thing that always comes up. So I would say that's something that people just kind of tend to focus on too much. I mean, CMAC, I think, said, we brought up a good assistant coaches. Yeah. Like, that's just like, also too, like, people take certain people's word for it that this coach sucks. I'm like, how do you know he sucks? Like, I mean, I got to be honest. Like, out of all the guys who've coached at Notre Dame in the years that I've been doing this, very few of the guys suck. You know what I mean? Like, most of the guys are pretty good. Obviously, there's different levels. There's guys who work harder at recruiting. There's guys who are better coaches than other coaches. That's for sure a thing. But like, it was always Jeff Quinn sucks. Well, he didn't suck. He just wasn't good as Harry Heastand. Like it's just there's nuance there, but it's just like it is with the players, right? Where it's like, well, this guy sucks. It's like there's a gap there between
like I think there's best. Like a whole like I've said it before. Like if you're not an All-American, then you're trash. Get out of the lineup. Like that. That is that is pervasive. I think it's like with Drew Pine, right? Like he went 8-2. Like, and look, a lot of that is at Clemson, right? Like he got lifted up by his team and that sort of thing. But then like he also beat Drake May in a shootout. Like he beat Drake May. I mean. Sam Hartman lost.
He beat their Gene Chizik defense, but Sam
Hartman lost. Like they all played. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I do think they just like, or now the thing has been with Drew Pine, how like people are like laughing at him because Jaden Rashada went to Arizona State. They're like, well, now Pine's not going to play, and it's like. Well, I mean, maybe he won't. Maybe Rashada will play in front of him. But it's like, why are people rooting against him? Like, I mean, all the guy did was go out and like, play his best. Like, I just think, and he ended up, he wasn't great. Yeah. But I mean, if you're talking about for like a backup quarterback, I mean, he played a lot better than many backups.
Yeah.
And he certainly, like, people would say I remember repeatedly saying this guy would be the worst quarterback out of any Power 5 team. No, you do not watch college football then, because there are some horrendous guys there. He is probably like a slightly above average guy.
Yeah.
But at Notre Dame, you're not trying to get slightly above average. So that's how it turns into he sucks.
Right. And so that was why I tweeted yesterday, like, the chances that Jaden Rashada never becomes as viable a starter as Drew Pine is probably pretty good. It has nothing really to do with Drew Pine. It's just that we've seen Drew Pine play. We've seen what the floor is, and we've seen what the ceiling is, right? Well, Jaden Rashada might not get to that, and and we've talked about it before. Like, it's just a matter of how often these guys don't work out, especially quarterbacks, right? I mean, the fact that they're going through all this drama.
I just saw this today, so I just wanted to bring it up. I think it was the Athletics' Max Olson who tweeted out a piece that he did where out of the top 50 quarterbacks from I don't know how many years now, but 75% of them are guys who are ranked in the top 50 end up transferring. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's because, I mean, obviously they're not playing right away or something happens, whatever. And so Jaden Rashada I'm not saying his ceiling isn't higher. We're not saying that his ceiling isn't higher than Drew Pine's. I think, of course it is. But he might not be better than Drew Pine this year. And because of that, he might just end up transferring.
Right.
And that's just how
it's not like Arizona State was his first choice.
No.
Like he did
right?
it. So
yeah.
So I think and so Nathan Urbach, Rajon brings up a good one. And I think he says backup players not getting playing time. And Nathan Urbach says the hate for Bertrand and Kaiser. And for me, it comes down to, like, I think fans spend too much time thinking about how to replace this guy that you're not happy with. Right. Yeah. Like that. There's so much involved in who plays and who doesn't that we don't know, like the information we don't have. Right. And a perfect illustration of that is like Jordan Johnson, where it was, he's got to get in there like McKinley, like not very good. Like there was this whole thing like Ben Skoranek, like he needs to play over Ben Skoranek. Now Ben Skoranek's like the one in the NFL. It's just funny. But it's like, he's got to do this. You got to give him, you have to. And then it turns out he's missing practices and he's not going to class. And there's all these other things. And then he goes to UCF and he never gets on the field, like ever. So that's where it's like, there's so much information that we don't have about why X player isn't playing or why this guy is playing, that it's almost like not worth the conversation. Yeah. It a lot of the time. Sometimes it's fair and you like there's enough evidence.
Sometimes, but most of the time
if it's like if you have a guy who's been playing and it's like, hey, this guy when he's in, like he makes a lot of plays. When this guy's in, he's not. So like, what's the problem, right? That's one thing. But when it's like a guy who's not out there at all, like Prince Colley is a good example. Batelho, right? Like, the offensive line, like that sort of thing. So that's one where I think people think too much about it. What is something that people don't think enough about?
I mean, that one I think is even tougher because I feel like everybody microanalyzes the team. That's part of being a fan, right? Everybody just thinks about they're critical of everything, and and I'm not saying like sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not, whatever, but that's just one of the pieces of it. So I don't even really know if there is an answer to that because I think you can say maybe there isn't enough focus on how like the Goog hasn't been updated. Like, and that's been something that's been like, it's like they talked about that like 6 years ago or whenever it was. And it's like, that's still not happened yet. And why not? And I know the pandemic happened and all that, but I mean, other programs seem to be dishing out a lot of money to get facility upgrades and all that. So maybe that, I think that could be something, right? But I mean, then again, it's easy for, us to say that when we're not the people who have to fundraise hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. But I mean, it's obvious that, maybe that is something that should be kind of like be more written about it. And obviously that's like out of my lane or whatever, but why hasn't that gotten done yet? I think that is something that is probably more important than people realize.
Right. So like, to me, what was it? 05 that it was a new thing. It was a Charlie Weiss thing, or 06 or something like that. I mean, it was long enough to go, in my opinion. Like, so when Brian Kelly left, like we talked to a lot of people who said like, hey, the Gook thing, like he's right about that, and that's a good point. And I think just it needs to be like the coaches shouldn't have to ask. You are a football university. Notre Dame is known as being a football school, the premier football school in the nation, right? In their minds. Look at your stuff and be like, hey, like we need to make this better. No one has to ask us for that, right? You just need to do it, And so I think that's a good point. Like we don't, like I think we get so kind of caught up in no excuses, like this, that, and the other thing. It's like, hey, this actually needs to be upgraded. It's kind of a problem.
And I'm not talking about like the water slide kind of BS that some of these other schools do. Not that stuff, but just like there needs to be more office space for the coaching staff so you can hire more analysts, and then it's not, everybody's not sharing an office kind of thing. Like that kind of stuff is pretty important. I mean, just let alone like the getting a better spot for like meal planning and training table and all that. But like, I think that's probably something that doesn't get talked enough. But it's like probably the reason why it doesn't is because like it doesn't even matter if like nothing can be done about it, like by just people talking about it on the message board or on Twitter or on our show or whatever. Like it's, I mean, the people who are actually the people, the one doing it. Like, I mean, I know some fundraising people at Notre Dame, and they like basically, they work really, really hard to get money for Notre Dame, not just for football people, but for other purposes. Like those people work so hard, like incredibly hard, just to get people to like open up their checkbook. So I don't think it's on them at all. It's just, I don't know, for whatever reason, hasn't got done.
Rajon brings up a good point. Many don't realize how hard the players work every day. And it's not, to me, it's not they're going to practice and working hard and whatever. And it's like, you signed up for that sort of thing. Like, fine. For me, it's more of understanding that being a football is somewhat different than other sports because there's a mental amount of energy that it takes for just to learn the playbook, right? Like we always, it's like, oh, teach Tobias Merriweather like 5 routes and that's all, and that's all it is, right? Understand that the expectation, even for himself, is higher than that, right? Like he wants to learn the playbook, and the amount of work and studying that it takes to get up to speed on that. If it was its own class, you would be spending more time on that than any other class that he has, because it takes a lot, right? And you're there every day and you always are studying, and there's checks and there's adjustments, and it's just football mentally. I feel like, and I've played a lot of sports, right? So I kind of know how much mental energy it takes to play it. It takes a lot, right, to learn the playbook and all these other things. And so I don't think people appreciate the fact that like football is not a class, right? And you're already taking like 15 to 18 credits, right? And then you're taking this you're in this sport that requires that a much amount of work, And so I don't think that people like the freshman thing. It's a lot. It's a lot, right? So like that, I think that's a good point. Like Rajon brings up, like if you have a freshman who it's like, why didn't he play more, or why, like trying to project freshman numbers is really hard because you don't know how they're going to adjust to that sort of workload, right? And it's a lot for anyone, right? Some adjust better than others. So, all right. Speaking of blue chip ratios, so CFB Hertz, we aren't talking enough about Michigan's 41% blue chip ratio for the 2023 class. So yesterday, Bud Elliott of Cover 3 Pod, I think he had like a YouTube short or something like that when he was talking about how this 2023 recruiting class look a lot like Brian Kelly's classes, right? And it was weird to me because Bud is a recruiting guy, right? So he understands, like there's a difference between.
He's more of a hot take guy now.
Well, he is, and it's kind of weird because you're going from like a situation like Brian Kelly's 10th ranked class in 2017 or whatever. Like, sure, it was 10th ranked, but if you look at like the number of 4-stars they had and the number of blue chip players they had,
the
right?
average ranking,
average per player, and the total points that you got for the composite, like it's not even close to like this season, And someone else brought up to him, like, didn't you invent the blue chip ratio? Like, it's, what was it, 82%, something like that, like 87%,
like 83% or something like that.
It's like, it's not even close to what Brian Kelly was doing. The last time that Brian Kelly had a class with that high of blue chip ratio was in 2021 because of Marcus Freeman, because Freeman brought in Jalen Sneed, and because he brought in Julian Tuihalamaka, because he brought in Josh Barnum, guys who admittedly said we would not come to Notre Dame if it wasn't for Marcus Freeman and his recruiting efforts, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like, I feel like gaslit by it. Like, what? I don't understand. It's very strange.
Well, first of all, I would say that like I met Bud a bunch of times. He's a good guy. Yeah, he's a nice guy. I do think you're part of that show. They talk about college football. Like, I think they have more shows per week than we do, and they're talking about everything. And it's like, man, you got to talk about everything. So they're coming up with whatever wild stuff all the time. And I also think too, when you're a national guy, he just doesn't know. Like, he doesn't. There's no way he knows Notre Dame better than the people who cover Notre Dame,
right? For sure,
that's for sure. He definitely doesn't know more than you or I about this recruiting class, or about how Marcus Freeman's effect on it, how it compares to other recent classes or anything like that. He just doesn't, because he doesn't follow it and cover it the way that everyone on the Notre Dame beat does. So he comes up with that, and I'll be careful when I say this, but it's it's kind of similar to Bill Connolly. I don't know, maybe it's a former SB thing, but when anyone comes back at them, they have to change it. They're like, they keep it to whatever it is so they can win the argument. They don't say, yeah, you know what? I see your point. No, they always turn it back into something else so they can win the argument, when it just doesn't really fit with, what, the point of what they're trying to say. So you can point to some things and say like, oh yeah, this is how it's the same. But anyone who covers the team and covers Notre Dame recruiting closely can tell you it's a lot different. It's a lot different. And definitely Brian Kelly would not have signed as good of a class as this if Marcus Freeman wasn't on the staff the year before, and if Marcus Freeman wasn't the head coach this year. There's numerous guys who wouldn't even give Notre Dame the time of day. Like you said, they wouldn't have chosen Notre Dame if not for Marcus Freeman. So that part plays a factor into it. But it just, in the sheer, if you look at even if you look at by any metric possible, by looking at 24/7 composite or whatever, you look and say, if this isn't, maybe this isn't the best class. Brian Kelly's best class was better than this class. Just on paper, right? That 2013 class was better on paper, right? Yeah. In saying that, this would have been the second best class. So he beat all other 11 recruiting classes that Brian Kelly had in 12 years. So what's the point of Bud's argument again? What's the deal there? So
yeah,
and I understand it's like one of these things. Part of the reason why Ham or anyone does those kind of things, because they want the engagement. They're like, oh, thanks, you gave it a click, whatever, right? Like, yeah, it's a very Clay Travis esque type of approach to content. Which, okay, whatever, man, do your thing. But like, I don't know. I kind of think it's trash, and I just don't think that they need to do. I don't think you need to do it.
Right, and it's just like, the other part too is, look, we know, like, and he kind of knows too. Like, Kyle, who is your favorite Notre Dame player? Kyle Hamilton, Michael Mayer. No relationship with Brian Kelly in recruiting. That's from their own mouths, right? That's not me saying. They've said I wasn't close with him. That wasn't the case. Michael Mayer, I wasn't close with him. Like, we didn't have a relationship, right? They committed to Notre Dame for other reasons. Like, is that Brian Kelly doing a good job in recruiting? Like, maybe, right? Everyone who ever said like, hey, he could be good. He's very good in a room. He's very personal, right? Or personable, right? Like, he's all those things. He doesn't have a relationship with the top players. So like, everyone knows this. No one is writing a story like Carter Carls did about how Notre Dame lost Peyton Bowen because he didn't have a relationship with Marcus Freeman. No one's writing a story saying Keon Keeley. Like, the only reason they're in on those guys is because of Marcus Freeman. That's the only reason, like, so.
And it's funny. There was a lot of those stories.
There was a ton, and honestly, and that was the one that Carter wrote. You could have written so many stories like.
I mean, Carter wasn't the only one who wrote those stories, right?
Right. But it's like, that's the most famous one, where it was like Jalen McMillan and Lathan Ransom.
I just think it's one of those things where, and Notre Dame would get mad about it.
Yeah.
Because they get mad about it. But it wasn't even like, it'd just be like throwaway lines in there, but it's just facts. It's just reporters just asking questions.
Yeah.
And them saying it. Right. I think so. It's just like a completely, it's just a completely different thing where comparing the two, and it's just a total, I don't even know. It's just uninformed. It's an ignorant take, to be honest. It's just like, it doesn't fit with anything. And I don't know. Probably lost some money on Notre Dame this year, so too bad.
All right. So let's get off that and let's go to the 2024 class, right? So we've already talked about the defensive line, edge players that you said. Why is edge? Why you had edge number one? So the edge, you had edge recruiting as number one. Why is that number one over the others that you named?
Well, I think because of one, the previous class.
Yeah.
Right. So they didn't have, out of the guys, like Armel Mukum's the only guy that I would say is probably going to stick at edge. I mean, Traore has a chance to stick at SE, but I mean, Vernon and Houston are definitely going to be inside guys. And I think Traore could easily grow into a 3-tech. Like he might be someone who stays out there too, but you don't want someone to stay out there because you don't have enough people. You never want that to be the case, right? And then I think if you look at the class before too, right, where, you know, they moved Burnham out to Viper and Gobert as, you know, not a Viper, but he's an end. But they just don't have a lot of numbers out there. And then when you're looking at, like, say, where the current, how the current team was built, and it's like, well, they had to get a guy like Javonte Jean-Baptiste because they're missing. So, like, he's going to be gone after this year. And yes, they're going to get Connor Kia back, who's also an edge, and they'll have some more bodies there, but it's still not an ideal spot to where you want to be, right? You want to have more of these guys, and especially because there's a lot of guys that you're going to get as edge guys that aren't plug and play. They're guys that are maybe need to add weight, maybe need to get a lot better versus the run at setting the edge. They have all these great pass rush traits, but they're completely raw with their hands and all that kind of stuff. So they're not, you want to get as many guys as possible. So I think that's one of the things. It's just a priority in this class because of numbers and because of just pure talent, what they have there. And that's why, to me, it's the most important.
Yeah. I have that third. It's not that I disagree with any of your points, I guess. I view what Notre Dame football. So number one, I have speed at the skill positions. That's my number one. And the reason I think that is because Notre Dame needs to be, like, speed to me in football is like kind of everything. Like, it's everything. Like, when you are fast, the defense is constant. That's all they're thinking about is speed. They can run by me. It's just, that is just like when I played, if I was like, I was always one of the faster players when I played. If there was someone who I played against who was like, this guy, he might be faster than me, like, that is always in your mind. You play a little softer in everything that you do. It's in the game. Like, when you game plan against speed, you're always thinking about, like, we got to be careful. You know, we got to be careful back here because if they get an angle on us or they get an edge on us, like, they're going to run by us. And I always like that. That's just like the scariest thing is a team that can just run by you. For me, Notre Dame that's the thing that Notre Dame is lacking. Like, last year, 2021, like, it was just like, man, they're not very fast. Like, they just don't. I don't feel like they scare teams. You know, and look, it's
they
great.
Didn't. Yeah.
Right. And it's great to be able to run at people, and that's a concern too. But there's nothing like speed, and I think they need to get more of that. And not just that, but I think it's available. And that's the other part is, like, Cam Williams, to me, like, stud, right? Like, he's not in like that top tier that we were talking about, where it's like Jeremiah Smith and Micah Hudson and Terrence
He's
Moore.
in that one right below it.
He's in the one right below. Adoree Jackson about Will Fuller. That's like a perfect example of where it's like, look, you're afraid of Will Fuller. That, like, someone like Adoree Jackson, an athlete like him,
you should be,
gets smoke showed like that. Yeah. Like, that is like, just, you're always thinking about it, right? And so for me, it's like, get those guys. You need to get those guys. Like, get the Ryan Wingo to go along with Cam Williams. Get Jeremiah McClellan. Right. I mean, Raggins, I know it's like, that's probably like a pipe dream, but like someone like that, right? Like, just get some guys that can run. Like, if they ever come around to, like, offering Xavier Jordan, which I really think they need to do, in my opinion, it might even be too late at this point, because now, like, every big school is in on him, and it's just like, you might just have to, like, that's just the way it goes, right? But like someone like that was like, get down the field. and really threaten teams. Like, I think that's what Notre Dame needs more than anything. Like, they've got the big bodies, right? Like, Braylon James is a speed guy. He's not like a burner guy, but he's fast and vertical threat. Caleb Smith is that, but Jaden Greathouse is a big body player. Rico Flores is a big body player. Get the speed. Get the speed outside, and I think that's what Notre Dame needs more than anything else.
I mean, it was on my list too, right? Like, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. We really just disagree on.
I think you can rank it any way you want, or whatever. Yeah. I just think these are all the priorities. We don't really. I mean, I don't think we're gonna get into big argument over what's more important or whatever. Like, if you saying that or somebody else telling me, oh no, they need skill speed more, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'm fine with it. Like,
well, let's talk about interior D line as a need. Because they have TJ Lindsey and Justin Scott are two kind of options there, and I think I personally think Notre Dame should take both. I mean, they should prioritize both, make them a big priority. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think they need. I think they need more guys that can be disruptive inside.
Do you think that Owen Wafel is that guy?
I think he can be. I think he has that potential to be. I really like him a lot, right? And he was the guy that I compared. The guy that I compared him to was Derek Landry, right?
Yes.
And I think, frankly, that would be. I mean, if he ends up being Derek Landry, that's exactly the kind of guy that I'm thinking about, right? Like that they need more of those guys, right? And so like. Justin Scott, I think, potentially has that ability to be a super, not just a space eater, like a totally disruptive dude in there, right? And I just think, whether it's a guy who's so TJ Lindsey is someone I view as a 3-tech, more so than an end. Like that's a guy too that I think whatever. And I'm always about like, if you're going to take a straight nose, this guy has to be a stud, right?
Yeah.
Which is why like Devin Houston is like a guy who is probably going to play 1-tech at Notre Dame, but he could play 3-tech. And that's what you want kind of more so out of thing, because if a guy plays nose and then he can't play nose, he can't play anywhere. Right. That's kind of where it is. It's like, if he's ineffective there, he can't play anywhere else. Right. Because it's like, you're recruiting that big body type. That's why too, everyone's like, man, they got to get more guys who are 330, like all these kind of guys. It's like, well, I mean, the guys that actually can move and do those kind of things, like there's like 5 of them every year. And 2 of them go to Georgia and 2 go to Alabama and 1 goes somewhere else. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's, and those guys are just few and far between. I mean, there might not even be 5 of them, might be 3 or whatever, right? Like there's just not a lot of those guys. So if you can't get those guys, you don't want to take a guy who's just 300 pounds just there. Like, so Darnell Ewell is a perfect example of like, man, this guy's this big body. He just he wasn't like twitched up. He didn't move great. And if he wasn't going to be like a space eater, then he was going to be nothing. And he kind of became nothing. Right. So, so you'd almost want a Heinisch more than that. Right. And it's not to say that you don't want to get guys with maybe like a higher ceiling than a Kurt Heinisch, but I think when it comes down to it, you want to get a guy that is going to, got that kind of first step. That was the one thing with Kurt Heinisch, is he had that like first step quickness. So like first step quickness, penetration, guys that can push the pocket as a pass rusher, get in the face of, push the middle of the field and be disruptive in the run game.
Yeah. I mean, it's vitally important. And I think that, you and Mike talk about it all the time about how they just don't have those guys inside. And I think they really need that. Are you worried about Notre Dame at offensive tackle?
I am a little bit worried. I don't think it's like like crisis or anything like that. Like, so, well, one, Joe Alt and Blake Fisher could leave after this year.
I think Joe Alt will.
I think Joe Alt will. I think
I
Fisher will
think they
probably stay.
need to get Fisher back. Tell him you will be our left tackle. That is an NIL situation where it's like, make it financially viable for him to come back, be Notre Dame's left tackle for a year.
Yeah.
And you be the first round pick. Because right now I don't know if he's there.
Yeah, I think I think that's exactly how I kind of see it playing out. Is even if he has a great year, that's because he could still be like a projected first round pick, but
he's the third pick in the draft.
He's like a guy who could be a top 5 pick.
Yeah,
he could be, right? So it's like that's the way you got to kind of sell it to him. And I think I think he's the kind of guy who would come back and do that too. So yeah. I think he's one of these guys who views himself as that, and that it could be that. So that's important. But in saying that, there is a possibility that they could both leave. So if that happens, obviously it's a different story. And you look at what they have on the roster right now, and they have, they don't have definite heir apparents. Like, so I think Tosh Baker, people are just probably forget like Tosh Baker's even on the roster because he's whatever, but like Tosh Baker could be like the next kind of like Josh Lugg guy who was like kind of forgotten and then ends up starting for a couple of years basically, because that could happen with a guy like him. I think, or at least for a year, right? Like I think that could happen. So you have that, Emil Wagner. I think I was very, very high on Emil Wagner, and I'm hoping that I think he made some good strides last year. I heard a lot of good things about him in camp last year. But in saying that, like, is he going to be like the third tackle good this year? I don't know. Right. But that's where you kind of want it to be, because he's going to be probably a starter. Maybe he might have to be the left tackle in 2024. Right. And then after that, like Ty Chan, is he a right tackle? Is he a guard? Michael Carmody, I mean, the guy, is he going to weigh 280 pounds? Because if that's the case, he's not going to be playing. Like, it just, so I think there's that kind of thing. And then, in this year's class, Charles Jagusa could be a right tackle. And then I think that, like, Absher is a tackle, but it's like, what is he going to do? How close is he going to be? I don't think
how long is that going to take? Even if he's good, like, I mean, he was in a option offense, right? Like
it might take him a couple years, right? It might take him a couple years, right? So I don't know. So look at Mike McGlinchey, was a guy who I think people were high on, but he didn't start until the end of his second year, really, right? So, and I don't know if he was ready before then. And then obviously he took off and he ends up being a great player. But I think that's like, where are we kind of going from there? Like Sam Pendleton, I think could maybe play, right? But is he a better guy?
Guard to me.
Well, it's like one of those things with Hainsey where it's like he played, but he's probably going to be somebody who's
inside player.
Yeah. And Jagasaw, I think, is going to be more of I think he's better suited to play inside too. So when you have all these guys, you're like, I think they're better suited to play inside. It's kind of the opposite of you want a bunch of tackles that you could maybe like, Aaron Banks could play tackle, but he's going to be play guard. Quentin Nelson could play tackle, but he's going to play guard. Like Alex Bars could play tackle, and he did play a little bit tackle, but he's going to play guard. That's what you want. And they don't have enough of those guys, in my opinion. So that's why I think it's important that they, I think, they didn't really replace Elijah Page in the class.
Yeah, that wasn't time.
Yeah. So I think Tarek is another guy who's going to be a guard, right? He's definitely a guard. So where are you going from there? So that's why I think it's important. And unfortunately, it's not like a super deep class. I think there's a bunch of high upside guys that I think I probably are going to rise up quite a bit in the rankings. But like, yeah, that's a reason. There's a reason why people are like, oh, Gerby Lambert, like people are talking about him like he's this high priority, even though he's a good prospect, not like an elite of an elite, but he's going to be viewed that way for Notre Dame fans because they need a guy like him.
Yeah. One position we're not going to say is quarterback, which is great because they've got CJ Carr in the class, right? Like I think if he wasn't, it would probably be number one. Like they need to get an elite quarterback, and so the fact that they have CJ Carr, and we can go into in depth on him on like another show. We had a chance to see some full game tape of his loss to Glenville. Was it Glenville? I think it was.
Yeah.
Whoever it was. I was super impressed. I really was. And I know there was a lot of talk about, he didn't have a great junior year or whatever. In that game, I thought he was great. He especially the fact that he was under siege like so much. Like his team had no chance of blocking.
He didn't really have a great team this year, so that was like another thing with him.
They had no chance of blocking those guys, and he made plays when he needed to. I mean, we'll go into it later, but I was very impressed with him. I think everyone should be really excited for CJ Carr in 2024. So the last one we both agreed on was is getting as many elite defensive backs as you can. Like especially when you look at like Notre Dame's schedule this year, right? Like so you have Ohio State obviously can throw the ball, USC could throw the ball. Clemson has TCU's Riley. I can't remember his first name. He came over from
Garrett Riley,
Clemson. Garrett Riley. He came over from TCU. Obviously, they had a great offense there, led him to a national title game. So,
sorry to interrupt, but Bernie. I mean,
Bernie's on fire.
Bernie's on his like seventh coffee today. This guy's
Bernie is going
lighting it up. Wow,
Bernie is going after it. So, I wanted to get this from Jack Hopkins too because I saw it and I wanted to know why didn't Notre Dame recruit Nicola Harbor's free athlete defense? They did. Yeah, they offered him, and he wasn't interested. The thing about him is that he's a track guy in South Carolina, has a great track program. In my opinion, he was always going to go to the SEC because the SEC track is fire, right? And that's where it is. Notre Dame is a good track program for distance, but not sprinting. And so there you go. So that's what it is. I wanted to get to that from Jack, but get as many elite DBs as you can get. They've already got a commitment from Hobbs out of Ohio, and they're zeroing in on Leonard Moore. And so you want to keep building on that, right? And getting more defensive backs. They're still after the kid committed to Tennessee. Was it Caleb Beasley? Yeah. So they're still going after him. And obviously, look, if Notre Dame is still talking to him and trying to get him to visit, like obviously he's still talking to them, right? Like it's not one of those things where if they wouldn't be pushing like this if he wasn't receptive to the things that they're saying. So there's that, but it just get as many. Like to me, I think you do need to get because you missed on Peyton Bowen last year. Like I do think they need to get in on like a premier like playmaking safety, someone they feel like can play that role. Because look, they're not. Regardless of what you think of like Ramon Henderson and DJ Brown and Xavier Watts, like those guys are upperclassmen now, right? So they're getting on. So I think that's what they need. They need a lot of those guys. Jamie, what's your take?
I completely agree. I just think that if you look at where kind of recruiting was, especially with those most of those upperclassmen you named, there weren't not a lot of guys who were considered elite prospects there.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of played out that they haven't been elite players, right? Like, some of them still might be really good or are maybe even good now. I'd say X Watts is pretty close to pretty good now. But it's taken time, and with more elite guys usually are ready sooner, and they're going to have guys who are ready sooner. So, I mentioned in Six Thoughts today, like, so 50% of the guys who are on the roster now, right? Because there's probably going to be some changes later. Some guys will leave, whatever. That'll happen, right? Yeah. But like, out of the 16 guys on scholarship now that are defensive backs, only 8 of them are, we're blue chips. We're like, 4 stars, right? Well, 5 of those guys were in this class. So 5 of them are freshmen. That means 3 out of 11 of the rest of the guys I mean, and then two of those are Benjamin Morrison and Jade Mickey, who are sophomores, right? And Philip Riley was the only guy who was whatever. And obviously he hasn't really worked out, but it just shows you too, like there hasn't been a lot of guys that were elite impact. They haven't landed the Kyle Hamiltons. They haven't landed enough of those guys. I mean, and ideally, I mean, you're not going to land a Kyle Hamilton every year, but that's exactly what they need. I mean, obviously they need two of those guys if they could, but like if they could get one Kyle Hamilton type, which is why like Peyton Bowen was one of these guys that people wanted so much because he could have at least been close to that, right? Project close to that. So that's what they need in this. They need a playmaker at safety. Couldn't agree with you more. And I really just think I like to start with two corners. And I think both those guys project well. And I think they've shown they evaluate the corner position pretty good. Still, I would like to see them land one more elite corner in the class. In addition, if they could land more as well, to go with Hobbs. And then I think I would like to see them take, 5 or 6 DBs total. So if they can take a couple safeties, 3 corners, a couple safeties, I think that's would be ideal. And obviously you want all those guys to be like top guys.
Yeah. I think Bronte Johnson's a very important recruit in this class.
Yes.
He's a Fort Wayne kid. And not to like get that out of his head that he's going to be a receiver, man. Like safety, that's where it is. Like he has like he's a playmaker back there. He has good ball skills. He's a little light right now, but you can put weight on. Like Kyle Hamilton was light, right? As a junior in high school, right? You put on some weight, and then he got to the point where it's like he's a really big guy, right? Like 6'3", he's got good range and all those things. Like I said, he's got good ball skills. Like play safety, man. Safety is where it's at. Who wants to play wide receiver? That's for little babies. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. Love you, Ken Williams. So I think he's vital.
Yeah, I think he's a very important guy in the class.
He's very important. They need to lock him down, and they need to get him going on the safety track. CFB hurt Saban trying to poach Reese. Did I miss something? Is that true? Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't see it yet. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe right now. Maybe we could break some.
I wouldn't be surprised. If he was interviewing him. Okay, I just see it right here.
Just reported
Chris Lowe reported that he's a top candidate to become Alabama. I mean, I'm not surprised at that at all.
That would be super funny because of just the perception around Reese.
Well, we've been telling people he's really good.
Yeah.
He's really good.
He's a good coach. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Remember Chip Long was interviewing and then nothing ever came of that.
Yeah.
So who knows? But I mean, I don't doubt he runs a pro style offense. Alabama wants to run a pro style offense.
Yeah, he does a lot of concepts, man. And look, I don't think all the Dan Orlovsky stuff. I know people kind of just poo-poo it away, but if you have the attention of someone like that, it's for a reason. It's not made up. I don't know how he would benefit from blowing smoke. If he has his attention, he has his attention, and so that's where it is. So, all right, I guess we'll leave it there, Jamie. We might have to do we might have a show to record some some going live if something gets reported. So, Jamie, you know what that means? People should hit the like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell.
Hit the notification. You never know. We might have to do emergency.
We might go live in 10 minutes. You never know, Jamie. So you're just going to have to do that. All right, so we'll end it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I guess stay locked in to irishsportsdaily.com. If there's any Tommy Rees breaking news, we can talk about that. And look, if Tommy Rees leaves the program, there will be a live show shortly thereafter. So we'll talk about that. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stay locked in, and we'll talk to you. Have a good weekend otherwise, and we'll talk to you soon.